This is Investment Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Daily live streaming interactive. Featuring Mrs. Backup. Subscribe, hit the notification, smash the likes. Now, here's Backup Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to Investment Perspectives, everybody. I'm Brad Kimes. You can follow me on Twitter at BackupBradley above, and all the information we're going to talk about here. So, okay, first of all, I have quite a bit that I want to lay out today, and I'm going to do my best to move through it as quickly as possible. We need to talk about the recent Brad Garlinghouse video, which we will get to at the end to bring this thing home. And then we need to talk about inflation and why that's important. Let's start with this article that kind of kicks it all off here. And basically, we're looking at JP Morgan says Bitcoin crash survival showed it has staying power, which, listen, JP Morgan just a couple years ago, Jamie Dimon, the head of that bank, said I'd fire anybody working for me that was trading or buying Bitcoin. So they've made quite a pivot, and now they're extending banking services to Coinbase and Gemini. So there's been quite a pivot here towards the crypto space. Now, this article prompted Brad Garlinghouse to make a comment that he put out yesterday, and he says, "Brr, jokes aside, which are hilarious, we need to take a cold, hard look at how many countries are likely on the precipice of extreme inflation. Diversification into other asset classes, including crypto, could help stabilize markets in the future." Really amazing insight from Brad. Now, for those of you who don't know, inflation is what? The cost of goods and services increasing over time, right? So just to give you the stock definition here, is an economic term that refers to an environment of generally rising prices of goods and services within a particular economy. As general prices rise, the purchasing power of the consumer decreases. This is one of the pitfalls for the wealthy and the lower class income class of the world, because they usually stay in cash and they get beat up over time from inflation, where usually the upper class usually take the cash and bury it into assets and different diversified investments, whether it be stocks or land, property, such. So just side note there. Now let's take a look at the countries here. This gets quite interesting, so stay with me on this. Let me walk you to the river here. So Venezuela, over 2,000% interest increase there. Zimbabwe, 766%. Sudan, 81.6. Lebanon, 46.5. Argentina, 42. South America, right? South Sudan, 40%. Liberia, Iran, Angola, Ethiopia, Haiti, Suriname, Zambia. The list goes on and on here. I think you get the point, right? Look at Turkey at 11.39 and Ghana at 11.3, right? Uruguay, 11.05. So you can see this is just where it is now. Now, we're not even factoring in yet what Brad is talking about. He's talking about on the precipice of extreme inflation. Well, these countries are already in extreme inflation. What is one of the common factors about what is it that these countries all have in common? They are also exotic corridors. That's right. When you hear Ripple talk about opening corridors, you hear them talking about opening the lower exotic corridors that exist where there's not as much demand. It's easier for XRP to compete in those corridors because of the lack of capital and dormant capital that exists to make those exchanges. And they usually reference that in the conversation in the form of remittance corridors, so sending money back and forth. But the reality is, it's actually a much larger conversation to what Brad Garlinghouse is talking about. Because what he's talking about is diversification based on the fact that a lot of other countries in the world are on the precipice of extreme inflation because of the global financial crisis that we are in. So this conversation gets much bigger than talking about remittance corridors. And this is just another list of the same exact thing that I was just showing you. So now, with that being said, understanding that they are still on track, they're still doing everything that they've planned to do, targeting the lower exotic corridors, which I believe through remittance is the first way to get in because there's a lower regulatory hurdle there as there are with the banks. But I think if you pay attention to the larger narrative of the global financial crisis, this all plays tenfold into how it can be beneficial because of the situation that those exotic countries or corridors will be in because of the global financial crisis amplified. Now, let's look at BRICS. What is BRICS? It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa in a coalition is what it is. Now, we know that we have seen evidence, plenty of evidence, that Ripple is working in Brazil of recent. We've even had Marjan Delatine recently comment on that fact and support all of that speculation. So, moving on to here, we also know that Ripple and MoneyGram has made a huge, huge impact with the Federal Bank Limited in India. This is two out of the BRICS coalition, which is another whole entire network. We also know that China has Yoshitaka Kitao from SBI, an original investor in Ripple, on a board there in China based on payments, digitization, tokenization. Pretty remarkable stuff. We know that South Africa is working in a very deep relationship with the Bill and Melinda Gates Mojo Loop project. So I'm not quite sure what we have nailed down about Russia or not, but I mean, that is every country except Russia to date, and there may be even a connection there that I'm not aware of as of yet. So we're seeing BRICS coalition tied in for the most part with Ripple to an extent, whether it's through the corridors or at least through the remittance corridors, We're seeing the exotic countries that were pursued by Ripple from the very beginning. And I believe now, because we know that, as Chris Larson said, XRP is to be a global supplement to trade. And because they have started with these lower exotic corridors and remittance areas, now that there is a global financial crisis making this entire scenario amplified, it really sets up XRP for the win, even if they start with lower value, high frequency payments to begin with. Okay, let's keep going here. So there's Ripple set to build payments corridors in Brazil, just more support to the notion, right? And then here is this clip right here. This is the recent video from Brad Garlinghouse, and I just want to play this from, hold on one second, let me cue this up here, because this is pretty remarkable what he says here. All right, let's go from right here and just listen to everything in here.
Everything. 30 million unemployment filings. That's just in the U.S. So I, by no means, am trying to be the Grim Reaper and describing, what I think all of us are feeling. But I do think there's some examples where it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Now, listen to what he's about to go into, because I want you to keep in mind when he breaks this down. We've talked many times here about global reset or debt jubilee, and the fact that, the United States is printing so much money to throw down this hole that we are actually in. And that can cause what people refer to as a melt-up. Imagine if you had a house that was burning, and let's just say it was actually just the bedroom of that big house. The fire department came and put enough water on your house to not only put out the bedroom, but let's say it equaled the total volume of water of Niagara Falls for one 24-hour period. The house would be totaled not from the fire, but from the water. The printing of the money is the water. And I think this is what he's alluding to, and listen to what he goes into now.
if you look at the unemployment filings, and the government obviously is trying to react aggressively to address that. Here's a headline from a couple weeks ago. I think the government stimulus now stands at about $3 trillion here in the United States alone. I expect it's going to continue to grow. And I think that, while probably necessary to prevent an even more significant macroeconomic calamity, it definitely is going to have an impact on the future. And I think will, I believe, result in the debasement of fiat currencies. And you are seeing that in some emerging markets already, where the exchange rates have started to shift. But even here in the United States, it's a real factor. One visualization of this, and in history, looking back, is on the next slide, is something we saw happen in the Weimar Republic, which was what we now call Germany after World War I, where they printed money to, frankly, fund the war effort, and that resulted in massive inflation after World War I. In 1923, people literally, as this visual shows you, were carrying wheelbarrows full of printed Deutschmarks in order to buy a loaf of bread. I'm not that bleak of an outlook about the U.S. dollar, but I do believe it would be disingenuous not to acknowledge that what's happening here right now will certainly have an impact over the coming years. And, we won't see it just kind of go away quickly, because the things we're doing now will have second and third order effects.
Okay. Boom. Now, coming back to this, we need to take a cold, hard look at how many countries are likely on the precipice of extreme inflation. Now, I'm showing you countries that are actually already in extreme inflation. There's an entire list here of countries that are high. I mean, look, 6% is high. 5% is high, right? Normally between 2 and 3% inflation is like usually a goal rate for, I believe, the United States, if I'm not mistaken. So, knowing that even the United States, with all the printing, what he's suggesting here is he is suggesting clearly that in this comment, we could see problems arise in inflation reaction. And listen, we've had this conversation with co-host on the show on Fridays with Cryptopolis. Inflation slipping to hyperinflation even. No one's trying to be an alarmist, but what I am trying to point out here, quite simply, is this. Ripple is poised to be the solution. Not for the United States, but for the planet. Don't believe it. It's still true. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. Hit the like and subscribe. Trouble's coming. Brad Garlinghouse is breaking it down to you about the impact of the global financial crisis. You might not want to listen to me when I say it, but I think you may want to start listening to him when he does. All right, guys, hit the like and subscribe. Share the content if you like it, and I'll catch you on the next one.